Her daughter Sarah had woken with a fever and Elena had spent precious minutes coaxing medicine into the 8-year-old before bundling her off to the neighbor who watched Sarah on school days. Elena's beat-up Honda coughed and sputtered at the third red light and she whispered a small prayer that it would just hold on a little longer. She couldn't afford another repair bill. Not this month. She was a secretary at Henderson Industries and she'd been late twice already this month. Once when Sarah's school called about a playground accident and once when the car had simply refused to start. Her supervisor Mrs. Chen had been understanding but firm. One more time and there would be consequences. Elena gripped the steering wheel tighter and tried to calm her racing heart. The highway stretched ahead through the downpour and traffic moved at a crawl. She glanced at the clock on her dashboard. 15 minutes until her shift started and she was still 20 minutes away. Her stomach twisted with anxiety. This job was everything. It paid for their small apartment and Sarah's asthma medication and the weekly groceries that Elena stretched to last as long as possible. Then she saw him. A man in a gray suit sprawled on the wet pavement beside a black sedan pulled halfway onto the shoulder. The hazard lights blinked weakly through the rain. Cars rushed past without slowing and Elena felt her foot ease off the gas pedal almost without thinking. She couldn't just drive by. She pulled over behind the sedan and turned on her own hazards. The rain soaked through her thin jacket the moment she stepped out. The man was trying to sit up and she could see blood on his forehead mixing with the rainwater. "Sir," she called out as she hurried toward him. "Sir, are you all right?" He looked up at her with dazed eyes. He was maybe in his early 40s with dark hair gone silver at the temples. His expensive suit was ruined with mud and rain. "I think so," he said slowly. "I must have. I don't remember. My head." "Don't move too quickly," Elena said gently. She knelt beside him on the wet ground and her work pants soaked through immediately. "Did you hit your head?" "I was dizzy. I pulled over and then. I don't know. I think I passed out when I got out of the car." Elena looked at the gash on his forehead. It wasn't deep but head wounds always bled more than they should. She pulled off her jacket and pressed it against the wound. "Hold this here," she instructed. "We need to get you to a hospital." "No, I have an important meeting," he protested weakly. "You have a head injury," Elena said firmly. "The meeting can wait." She helped him back into his car and called 911. The operator said an ambulance would be there in 10 minutes. Elena stayed with him and kept pressure on the wound and made sure he stayed awake by asking him simple questions. "What's your name?" she asked. "Michael," he said. "Michael Henderson." Elena's heart skipped. Henderson, like Henderson Industries. But it couldn't be the same Henderson. That man was a billionaire who ran his company from the top floor that Elena had never even visited. The ambulance arrived and the paramedics took over. Michael Henderson grabbed her hand before they loaded him onto the stretcher. "Thank you," he said. "You stopped when no one else would." "Anyone would have done the same," Elena said softly. "But they didn't," he replied. "You did." She watched the ambulance pull away and then looked at her watch. She was 45 minutes late now. Her heart sank but she knew she'd made the right choice. Some things mattered more than keeping a job. A man's life certainly did. She drove the rest of the way to work with her jacket ruined and her clothes still damp. Mrs. Chen was waiting at her desk with a tight expression. "Mrs. Morrison," she said. "My office please." Elena followed her on shaking legs. She tried to explain about the injured man and the ambulance but Mrs. Chen held up one hand. "I'm sorry Elena," she said, and she did sound genuinely sorry. "I know you're a good worker and I know you have responsibilities at home. But this is the third time. I have to let you go." The words hit Elena like a physical blow. She nodded slowly because she couldn't trust her voice. She cleaned out her desk while her coworkers avoided making eye contact. 20 minutes later she sat in her car in the parking lot and let herself cry. Just for a few minutes. Then she dried her eyes and drove to pick up Sarah because life didn't stop just because your world had fallen apart. The next 2 weeks were the hardest of Elena's life. She applied for every job she could find and stretched their savings as far as possible. Sarah's medicine was running low and the rent was due in 5 days. Elena lay awake at night doing calculations in her head and trying not to panic. Then the letter came. It was on thick expensive paper with Henderson Industries printed at the top. Elena's hands trembled as she opened it. Maybe they wanted her to return something. Maybe there was a final paycheck she'd forgotten about. Instead it was a request to come to the main office for a meeting with Mr. Henderson himself. Elena's first instinct was to ignore it. She'd been fired. What could they possibly want? But curiosity got the better of her and she borrowed a good outfit from her neighbor and took the bus downtown because her car had finally given up entirely. The Henderson Industries building was all glass and steel and stretched up toward the sky. Elena had worked there for 3 years and had never been past the 5th floor. The elevator to the executive offices required a special key card and a stern-faced assistant escorted her up. Michael Henderson's office took up half of the top floor. Floor-to-ceiling windows looked out over the city and the furniture probably cost more than Elena made in a year. Michael stood when she entered and Elena saw the small bandage still on his forehead. "Mrs. Morrison," he said warmly. "Thank you for coming. Please sit down." Elena perched on the edge of an expensive chair and folded her hands in her lap. "I wanted to thank you properly," Michael continued. "I had a medical episode that morning. Low blood sugar combined with a blood pressure medication I'd just started. If you hadn't stopped, well, the doctors said I could have been seriously hurt or worse." "I'm glad you're all right," Elena said softly. "I asked around about you after I recovered," Michael said. "I learned that you worked here. And I learned that you were fired that same day for being late." Elena felt her cheeks flush. "That wasn't your fault. I was already on thin ice." "It was absolutely my fault," Michael said firmly. "You lost your job because you stopped to help me. I've spent 2 weeks trying to figure out how to make that right." He slid a folder across his desk. "I'm offering you a position as my executive assistant," he said. "The salary is here. So are the benefits including full health coverage for you and your daughter." Elena opened the folder and her breath caught. The salary was 3 times what she'd been making. The benefits included dental and vision and a college fund contribution. "Mr. Henderson," she whispered, "I can't, this is too much." "It's exactly right," he said gently. "You showed me something that morning, Elena. You showed me that there are still people in this world who will stop and help a stranger even when it costs them something. I want that kind of person working with me. I need that kind of person in my life." Elena felt tears prick her eyes. "My daughter has asthma," she said. "Her medicine is expensive and she has episodes sometimes where I might need to leave quickly." "Then we'll make sure you have the flexibility to do that," Michael said. "Family comes first, always." Elena took the job and her life changed in ways she never could have imagined. She was good at the work and Michael was a kind and fair boss. They developed a friendship built on mutual respect and understanding. He invited her and Sarah to his home for holidays and Sarah called him Uncle Michael. One evening 2 years later they stood in his office watching the sun set over the city. The building was empty except for them and the cleaning crew. "Do you ever think about that morning?" Michael asked quietly. "Sometimes," Elena admitted. "I think about how scared I was. How certain I was that I was making the wrong choice." "But you stopped anyway," Michael said. "I couldn't not stop," Elena said. "That's not who I am." Michael turned to look at her and his expression was soft with affection. "I know," he said. "That's why I'm so grateful you came into my life." Elena smiled and thought about the twisted path that had led her here. She thought about the rain and the fear in the moment of choice on that highway. She thought about all the ways one decision could ripple out and change everything. "Me too," she said quietly. "Sometimes kindness costs us something in the moment. Sometimes doing the right thing means risking the very things we're afraid to lose." But Elena had learned something precious on that rainy morning. She'd learned that the person she wanted to be was worth more than any job or paycheck. She'd learned that character wasn't just what you did when people were watching but what you did when no one would know either way. And she'd learned that sometimes when you help someone else you end up saving yourself. Sarah graduated from college on a sunny May afternoon years later. Elena sat in the audience and watched her daughter cross that stage and accepted her diploma. Michael sat beside Elena and squeezed her hand when Sarah waved to them both. "Her asthma's doing so much better," Elena said softly. "She's grown into a remarkable young woman," Michael replied. "Just like her mother." Elena thought about the long road that had brought them all to this moment. The struggles and the fears and the small acts of courage that had changed everything. She thought about rain and kindness and the way one choice could echo through years. She reached over and squeezed Michael's hand back. "Thank you," she whispered. "For everything." "Thank you," he replied. "For stopping." And Elena knew exactly what he meant.